Vision 4, la télévision africaine.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 4 p.m. news on Vision 4 television. We begin the news with our top stories. The visiting Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has affirmed their commitment in supporting Cameroon in its effort to preserving financial stability. Mr. Mitsuhiro Furusawa was speaking earlier this day at the Yaoundé Hilton Hotel as he met with financial stakeholders of the country. Meanwhile, out of Cameroon, members of parliament in Togo are meeting this Friday in an extraordinary session to discuss presidential term limits in the country, which has witnessed political instability for some months now. Those were our top stories. Details in a moment. If you are just joining us, you're watching the 4 p.m. news on Vision 4 television. We begin the news talking about economic issues, where the visiting Deputy Director of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has told Cameroonian financial stakeholders that they are ready to support the country in its quest to preserve its financial stability. He was speaking this day in Yaoundé, the conference at the Yaoundé Hilton Hotel, which brought together financial stakeholders of the country and members of government. Prince Kangaso was there and now report.
The conference on the relation between Cameroon and the International Monetary Fund saw the IMF Deputy General dishing out possible causes of the depletion of Cameroon's finance, of which he mentioned the frequent attacks of Boko Haram, the flow-in of refugees from neighboring countries, and the steep fall in oil prices. To him, in order for Cameroon to remove bottlenecks to growth, it needs fiscal reforms, which he says is a key area of the IMF-supported program. By this, Mr. Furusawa means the IMF will provide the government of Cameroon with technical assistance and training on fiscal reform. He added that Cameroon needs a better control and transparency in budget execution, and the government should give the private sector more access to financial services. This, as liquidity is declining. He also noted the need to improve the business environment by simplifying the tax system and encouraging the private sector to participate in key sectors of the economy. This, as banks in Cameroon have been ranked low in terms of competitiveness. He also reiterated that if Cameroon is to gain financial and economic stability, then it has to implement reforms that will support the economy to benefit all Cameroonians. The conference also gave journalists the opportunity to ask questions on the state of Cameroon's financial economy. This, the IMF assistant boss, with members of government present, assured the media that though growth is slow, there will be a gradual rebound starting in 2018. The IMF, through its fund-supported program, will continue to support Cameroon's economic and financial reforms.
Out of economic news, we now talk issues related to politics, where today Cameroon has joined the rest of the world to commemorate the International Day of Democracy, though some politicians in Cameroon believe democracy is in perfect practice in the country. Others feel that the concept is still a far-fetched reality in the country. Details of this in the following report. The 10th edition of the International Day of Democracy is commemorated worldwide in a particular context, as power tussle, electoral fraud, socio-political tension is the order of the day in most countries, with Cameroon inclusive. Talking about the prospect of democratic tenets in Cameroon, some politicians believe much is still to be done.
Everyone political parties, every actors in any level has to care of the democracy, because democracy means power to the people, and the people, because they cannot, everyone cannot decide it. They choose to give the mandate to the President of the Republic and the Parliament.
Meanwhile, others think the government is doing a lot to ensure the effective implementation of the concept in the country.
And our desire is that we move forward from where we are to a better place. And for us to do that, there has to be understanding. We must be able to listen to each other, talk with each other, appreciate each other's points of view, and then come up with something which is going to help us to be better than what we are.
On the other hand, the younger generation feels frustrated and abandoned by the governing elite since they are never involved in decision making.
Relegated to roles of hoisting of banners, pasting of posters, and the real building of the youth, the real capacity building of the youth in our political parties is not yet effective. Yeah, I will commend a few political parties, CPDM, who has come up with an academy, and some other political parties that are trying to engage in youth building, capacity building. But we want to see more. We dream, for example, of seeing political parties endorsing youth candidacies and investing them with more responsibilities. We see that happening in other countries around the globe.
Nonetheless, Cameroon's practice of democracy has been put to question at all levels regarding the laxity in the effective implementation of the principles of decentralization, long stay in power by presidents of political parties, and the violation of the constitution. However, Cameroon's first vice president of the National Assembly, Hilarion Etong, has reiterated the need for a democracy that can ensure sustainable development in the country. Still in democracy-related story, where this year's edition, being the 10th edition of the World International Day for Democracy, comes at a time when socio-political tension has taken center stage in most countries around the world. Stakeholders believe that strengthening institutions of democracy in most countries will help to reduce conflicts in the world drastically. LOVELINE ENJEH now tries to contextualize this year's theme.
Democracy and conflict prevention focuses on the critical need to strengthen democratic institutions to promote peace and stability. Observing the International Democracy Day at a time when the world is mixed up in wars, when countries are fighting against each other and internal turmoil plague others, the theme democracy and conflict prevention therefore finds its place. After all, when there is democracy, then conflict can easily be prevented. This, a more integrated approach, is used to foster resilient societies, call for effective and inclusive democratic governance, and respect of human rights. Resilient societies are expected to mitigate dispute through mediation and dialogue. Conflict prevention is also expected to curb through effective conflict prevention mechanisms and infrastructures. Strong leadership to support democracy, strengthen civil society, empower women, and uphold the rule of law are conditions that preserve stability and peace. Celebrating the International Democracy Day, governments are encouraged to review the ways of governance, especially freedom of expression, to enable the masses have their fill.
Let's now talk issues related to the national security, where some newly promoted police officers in Cameroon have been called upon to use the knowledge acquired in school to promote national security. The call was made this day in Yaoundé by the Delegate General for National Security, Martin Bargangele, as he chaired the ceremony to award these policemen epaulets. Pris Kangaso now develops this story.
The solemn ceremony, spiced by military honors, the Delegate General for National Security, Martin Bargangele, officially awarded epaulets to some 25 divisional commissioners and 7 principal police commissioners. Of the 7, 1 was specially promoted by the head of state, President Paul Biya, for his brave work. Nagasu Gilbert was the police officer who stopped the killing that took place recently at a gendarmerie post in Kusiri. Presiding over the ceremony, the Delegate General for National Security urged the newly promoted officers to continue serving their country with love while respecting the laws. He also asked them to keep a good image of the country, to be disciplined and follow the example of Mr. Nagasu. These officers have as duty to work towards the protection of national security, having that the country is plagued by insecurity. They were promoted by a presidential decree signed on the 6th of September 2017. Only joy and happiness on their faces could explain how they felt.
It is a sentiment of joy. I am happy.
It should be noted that there are other 19 police officers, 140 police officers of second grade, 22 inspectors of police, 45 of second grade, 1,077 peacekeepers, and 165 of second grade who will also receive epaulets in the later ceremony to take place at the Yaoundé City Council.
From security, we talk education, where the council in charge with the award of academic palms in Cameroon say they have received over 1,000 applications from teachers who are willing to be awarded the academic palm in Cameroon, as against over 2,000 last 2016. The information was made public this day in Yaoundé in a third ordinary session of the council, which was chaired by the Minister of Secondary Education, Ernest Gale Bibehe. Please Kangase once more comes back to this story.
The head of state, President Paul Biya, has placed much attention to the important role that teachers play in the society. This made him to come about with the creation of the Academic Palms Award. This to honor teachers who have spent at least 15 years in the profession. This 15th of September 2017, the third ordinary session of the National Council of the Awards of Academic Palms is taking place with some 1,337 files to be studied. The event, officially opened by the Minister of Secondary Education, Gale Bibehe, recognizes those teachers who have contributed in the promotion of professional learning and rendered quality service to national education. The award is also for those teachers who died in active service. Speaking during the event, the Minister of Secondary Education said 1,337 files were registered this year, as against 2,437 in 2016, thus a 45.13% drop. He explains that the drop could be due to the non-respect of modalities by some applicants or the thought of having been registered already by hierarchy, which was not the case. The event at the Teachers Resource Unit was launched some 10 months ago by the Minister of Secondary Education. After a close examination of the files by the council members, a final list will be made and those selected will be decorated on October 5th on the occasion of World Teachers' Day.
On to diplomacy. This time around, the Minister of the Economy, Planning and Regional Development, Louis-Paul Motaze, has this day granted farewell audience to the outgoing Italian ambassador to Cameroon, Samuela Isopi. During the audience, cooperation ties between Cameroon and Italy were assessed to be fruitful and continuous, given that Italian development projects in roads, stadia, fisheries, and other infrastructure will continue, though her 3 years of stay in Cameroon have not all been a bed of roses. She, however, regrets leaving the country. She also announced that the Italian government is ready to bring in more projects in Cameroon. At the end of the farewell audience, Chu Emmanuel caught up with the outgoing ambassador of Italy to Cameroon to assess her 3-year stay in Cameroon. Let's get her reaction.
I'm leaving, first of all, with already a feeling of nostalgia for the country. I spent here 3 years which have been very intensive and I think also very fruitful. Because I think that in only 3 years, because 3 years is not a long period of time, together with our Cameroonian partners, I think we have achieved a lot. I think this is a sign of hope and optimism, which show that if we work together, there are ideas, there are projects, there are good people. We have worked together also to try to foster cooperation between the two sectors, private sectors. I think we have already some success stories. We are working on new ones, And this is very important because we feel that the future of Africa and Cameroon is the private sector, and Italy can be a very good partner in this regard.
We now take you out of Cameroon to talk about international affairs, where members of parliament in Togo are meeting this Friday in an extraordinary parliamentary session to discuss on the presidential term limit in that country. This meeting comes at a time when protesters in Lomé, Togo have been protesting, demanding the president of the country to step down. Dinah Joyce Guang, you confirm this story.
Members of Parliament are this Friday meeting in order to reduce the number of presidential terms. The bill includes a 2-term limit for the president and a 2-round voting system. The opposition leaders, on the other hand, have expressed some concerns. Some of them fear that the bill could be drafted in a way that allows President Faure Gnassingbé to run for another term of office. Mr. Gnassingbé has been in power since the year 2005 and is already serving his 3rd term of office. He took over after the death of his father, who ruled Togo for over 38 years. Protests have been ongoing since August in order for the president to step down. Some have been calling for an immediate resignation of the president. At least 2 protesters have died and dozens have already been arrested related to the protests. Meanwhile, opposition leaders have already called for a mass demonstration against next week.
Out of Africa, North Korea is reported to have fired another ballistic missile across Japan. This is the second that North Korea is firing across Japan, creating new tensions. Dinah Joyce, you once more confirm this story.
The missile reached an altitude of about 770 kilometers, traveling 3,700 kilometers before landing in the Sea of Hokkaido. It flew higher and further than any one fired over Japan late last month. The Japanese Prime Minister said his country would never tolerate such dangerous and provocative actions any longer. South Korea responded within minutes by firing 2 ballistic missiles into the sea in a simulated strike on the north. As with the late test on August 29, the missile flew over Japan's northern Hokkaido island before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. There were no immediate reports of damage to aircrafts or ships. Sirens sounded across the region and text messages alerts were sent out to warn people to take cover. This test comes as a surprise to nobody. North Korea is steadily proceeding down the path to full ICBM capability. It started earlier this year by firing its new longer-range missile into the Sea of Japan, then flew over to Hokkaido in August. Next, it tested a powerful nuclear device which it claims can put on a missile. Now it has tested another intermediate-range missile at longer range and higher altitude. The next step will almost certainly be a test of the Hwasong-14 ICBM over Japan and far out into the Pacific. The main aim of all of this is to develop and deploy a reliable missile that can hit the mainland US.
This report brings us to the end of the 4 p.m. newscast on Vision Cat Television. But before we go, once more the top stories of the news. The visiting IMF Deputy Managing Director to Cameroon, IMF Deputy Director Manager to Cameroon affirmed their commitment in supporting Cameroon in its effort of preserving financial stability. Mr. Mitsuhiro Furusawa was speaking earlier today in Yaoundé at the Hilton Hotel in a conference which brought together financial stakeholders and government members. Meanwhile, out of Cameroon, members of the parliament in Togo are meeting this Friday in an extraordinary session to discuss the presidential term limits in that country. Stay tuned to more interesting programs on Vision Cat Television. At 4:30, Loveline ENJEH will be coming with her program Meeting Point. Meanwhile, at 8 p.m., Jean-Jacques Zé will be here with the French version of the news. God bless you.